studio now. It's a busy week to talk to Brian Hayes and Roisin Shorthall and Gerard Craughwell. Stephen Donnelly resigned from his seat as co-leader of Social Democrats. John Halligan contemplates resignation over the Waterford Hospital issue, and there's the ongoing debate over the future of the government. I think we can safely say, lads, the old silly season has been brought to a juddering halt, has it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, let's talk about the reason the Dáil came back during the week, Roisin, to you first of all, because you were in the chamber. Back early, debating something in a kind of a vacuum, though, because we only had a 4-page document as opposed to the full ruling on Apple. It was a bit strange.
It was a bit strange, and especially given the fact that the government had decided they were going to appeal this decision of the Commission. And, there was a sense that it was just a question of going through the motions. And I certainly made that point in my contribution to the debate that, the government would have been much more sensible if they had taken a bit of time to consider the judgment and the implications of appealing it.
Well, why did they all bring you back from your holidays then to have a debate in the vacuum?
We're told that some of the independent members of the government insisted on this. And, it would have been much more preferable, I think, if we could have had the debate first, it reflect on the implications of appealing or not appealing, got some answers to questions, and then made a decision. But unfortunately, Michael Noonan rushed headlong into an appeal without consulting at all and without considering the implications.
He did have a time frame imposed upon him. Was it 2 months, but he had to consider the appeal?
Yeah, but he didn't have to make the decision in 2 hours, which he seemed to do. So, as I say, he's handled this badly, I think. I think there's potential for a lot of damage to be done to the country. An appeal is certainly going to be very expensive, and in all of the contributions on Wednesday, there was a lot of jingoism and hold my coat and I'm going to fight this and we're not having the European Union telling us what to do. Like, that kind of stuff isn't helpful at all. We needed to look at the judgment to see, was there a basis for the judgment and was there a basis for appealing it? Okay. So far, I can't see any legal grounds for appealing that judgment, and there were a whole lot of issues conflated in this. The government, I think, went out specifically to muddy the waters, that this was somehow about an attack on Irish sovereignty. It was an attack on the 12.5% corporation tax. It was none of those things.
Okay, Brian,
it was a legal decision in respect of competition.
You've muddied the waters, right?
There's a lot in that, and the truth of the matter is, of course, Roisin is right. We don't have actually a judgment, and we're not likely to have a judgment for at least another 4 months, because the actual decision by the Commission won't be published because of all kinds of issues that Apple have in terms of confidentiality clauses. So it's virtually impossible to know the legal rationale for the judgment, which I believe to be defective. But whether I believe it to be defective or Roisin thinks it's great, none of that matters, because the decision will ultimately be made as an application to the general courts. Now, in the 3 other examples that have been taken on the selectivity principle, which came from the Santander ruling, which is the basis upon which the Commission judgment
is made. This is one of the original tax judgments that were made.
Well, no, it's a recent decision that's been taken because it extends, according to the Commission, what the definition of state aid is. This is not really a taxation issue. It's a state aid issue. And that, of course, that decision is now by appeal to the ultimate court of appeal, which is the ECJ. So you make the application to the general court, and then it ultimately goes to the ECJ. And I think that's why the Commission believe that they have a case ultimately to be granted. In the 3 other countries where this has been used, in the case of Netherlands, Luxembourg, or Belgium, in tiny amounts by comparison to the amount in Ireland's case, there's been an appeal given. There is, in my political sense,
an appeal is being pursued. It hasn't been given.
By the governments of those countries. So it is not unusual for governments, or indeed companies, who believe that they did the right thing at the time, irrespective of the morality of the tax break at the time, to actually take an appeal.
But
just make this point, because there's a lot of noise and fury about this. Sometimes in politics you need, in terms of the long term, there are huge reputational issues. I argue that there are actually bigger reputational issues by not appealing this. We don't know that the outcome of the appeal will take some years, because and sometimes the populist, simplistic thing is to take the 13 billion and run, but there's no substance in that.
Well, on that, the jingoism point that Roisin has raised here, Pierre Moscovici, who is the economics commissioner, now the commissioner are all at one on this. He says our decision to appeal is strange. He was speaking on his way into a meeting in Bratislava, I believe. He said that we are not a politicised commission. We are a political commission with a political will, and this political will is to clearly fight tax evasion, tax fraud, and aggressive tax planning. So, in other words, by appealing, we are therefore in Ireland not keen to fight tax evasion, tax fraud and aggressive tax planning.
What else is he going to say, Jonathan? The truth of the matter is that Pierre Moscovici, who has responsibility with Marguerite Vestager, who's responsibility with Phil Hogan and all the other 28 commissioners, are inevitably going to take to the position that DG Comp produced here. There's nothing unusual in that. What he is doing...
It's a collective responsibility.
Yes, it is. It's a form of a government, exactly. And they take an oath to the institutions and the treaties in Europe. They're not there per se as a French commissioner, although big politics is writ large over this. The bigger issue is not what he said this morning. The bigger issue is where we're coming next on tax harmonisation. And this is where I'm very strong on this issue. I'm a member of the European Parliament, but I will defend to my death the right of TDs who are directly elected by our people to set tax rates, to determine tax policy in Dáil Éireann. Because if we don't do that, we are going down, in my view, a very dangerous road which allows bigger countries to dictate policy.
This is exactly the kind of muddying of the waters that I was talking about there. I mean, this is a pretty straightforward issue in many ways if you clear away all of the fog around it. Our revenue facilitated Apple in minimising their tax liability.
By what though?
By facilitating them to avoid a lot of tax.
But just explain what that means to people.
It interpreted the tax law at the time.
No, it didn't.
Wait, just a second. It gave a ruling.
No, it didn't give a ruling.
Okay, hang on. Let Roisin make the point so you can counter it then.
The revenue gave a ruling which facilitated Apple in paying a very, very low rate of tax. Like, for example, since 2014, they were paying €50 on every €1 million that they made in profit. Now,
where were they making the profit?
They were making it all over the world, outside of the Americas. That's where they were making it.
I think this is exactly muddying the water.
Sorry, if I could just...
Hold on, Roisin, just finish the point and we can come back in.
I don't think that any of this is in dispute. Revenue facilitated Apple to pay very little tax on their worldwide profits. Just allow me to finish this. Now, under competition rules, you're not a state is not allowed to do that, to give preferential treatment to one company or any small group of companies. The single market dictates that every company must be treated the same, and no company or group of companies can be given any kind of advantage. Now, there has been a finding then by the Competition Commission to say we gave a particular competitive advantage to Apple, at the very least, and there's probably others.
Let's go back to the point. The ruling that you say was made by revenue. Brian has an issue with that.
Exactly. The charge of the government are muddying the road. Let's talk about Irish law here, and let's be clear and not use kind of populist muddying with the water some people. Revenue did not give a ruling. On two separate occasions, on 2 separate years, they were asked to give what is known in Irish law as an advanced opinion. An advanced opinion is not a tax ruling. Tax rulings ultimately are challenged by way of a High Court decision which comes from a lower court. They are an advanced opinion. And the basis of the Commission case, which Roisin is right about, is this question of selectivity. Were any other companies able to seek advanced ruling from the Irish Revenue for the purposes of getting clarity on what the tax liability of that company was? That is the issue upon which the case will be based. Because the government will argue, and the Irish Revenue don't do deals. The Irish Revenue simply enforce statutes.
Okay, I want to bring Gerard Craughwell in, because Gerard, this is a discussion that has been raging. But at the end of the day, this is going to come down to an interpretation and a court in Europe deciding whether Revenue's interpretation of the law, as Brian has set out there, was the right interpretation, which it may or may not be.
Sadly, you're right. I would agree with most of what Roisin has said here this morning, so I would... The situation, from what I can see, the big elephant in the room for the European project is the harmonisation of tax rates across Europe.
Which nobody, I don't think, on the panel here is in favour.
Absolutely not. But you have a commission that, to my mind, is determined to centralise as much as it possibly can. And the big stick was taken out on Ireland, and the Apple facilitation, no matter which way we look at it, Brian, there was a facilitation where Apple were able to walk away with profits in their pocket.
Profits remain, Gerard.
Well,
they have to be repatriated.
Yes,
Tim Cook's,
bottom line on it is what I fear here is that people are talking about 13 billion flowing into the Irish coffers. In the first situation, we'll have 13 billion lodged somewhere. It will be many years before we ever see a penny of it.
What the French and the Belgians and all the other countries that were the iPhones
and they're all going to say, hang on, part of that 13 billion is ours.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we could finish up with a situation where Apple hand over 13 billion to Ireland and we finish up with a bill of 23 billion.
There was a very interesting interview done with a guy called John Scully, who had been head of Apple, and it was done in 2014 at the Web Summit. And in the course of a lengthy interview there, he disclosed the fact that he was able to inform Apple that this facility for minimising their tax was available, because when he was in Pepsi previously, they were able to avail of it. Now, this isn't something that was set down that any multinational company could avail of. This was something where you had to be in the know.
The truth is there is a fundamental difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance, and the reason why tax avoidance happens because of a mismatch between all our tax laws, and that's why we have to have the OECD standard. But just one point, and this is the killer point, I think, as far as I'm concerned. The fundamental issue is, whether you strip away Apple and every other company, we need to get more from the corporate tax sector. Can we all agree on that? The good news is, in the last 2 years, we virtually doubled corporation profit tax from 4 billion to 8 billion.
Yeah, but hang on, how much of that was Apple last year trying to get that house in order?
A large chunk of it was. But isn't that good? The reason why, in fairness, and I have some sympathy with Michael Noonan, this issue has landed on his lap. He's actually got rid of the